The country's 24-hour Politico pundit perpetual panic conflictinator did not cause our problems, but its existence makes solving them that much harder. The press is our immune system. If it overreacts to everything, we actually get sicker and perhaps angry.
So, going back to Jon Stewart, who, if you watch TV at all, you might know, like, they hate each other. But they're kind of on the same page as far as what the media is doing and the coverage of, or the accuracy of a lot of the things that are going on in the media. So, that's kind of the intro to the topic. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce all the panel members. If you could all please just hold your applause till the end. I think you might have that back. First we'll start with Charles Trentelman. Charles Trentelman has been a working journalist for 40 years, including 33 at the Ogden Standard Examiner. He has covered every legislative and municipal beat in the paper's coverage area at one time or another, and for the last 17 years has also been the newspaper's local columnist, writing the Wasatch Rambler 5 times every 2 weeks. Dr. Leah Murray is a professor in the Department of Political Science and Philosophy at Weber State University. Her primary research interests are in American politics, specifically the presidency, Congress, elections, and youth and politics. She teaches courses on all aspects of American politics, especially the national institutions. And she's actually my teacher right now, so if she gets to talk first every time, you guys kind of know why. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and also newspaper journalism from Syracuse University in the United States. She then went on and received a Doctor of Philosophy in Political Science from the University of Albany in 2004. There, right here, we have Drew Tyler. Drew Tyler has spent the last decade in the television news and creating TV shows. His career has been full of 4-letter words, but not in a bad way. KWCR, KXRK, KLLY, KT, VX, KUTV, and KBFX. He wanted me to put all those in there, so just so. He is currently the instructor of digital media here at the communication department, and also wants you guys to know that he loves cooking and makes beautiful babies. So. Next to him, we have Shane Farver. Shane Farver is a multi-platform journalism instructor here at Weber State University and serves as the faculty advisor to the Signpost, which, if you don't know, is a student-run news organization. Prior to coming to WSU, Shane worked as a reporter, writing for the Standard Examiner for 3 years. While there, he covered crime, government, and military affairs. He has also written for various local and national magazines and online institutions. Last but not least, we have our student body president, Kyle Braithwaite. Kyle Braithwaite is currently, like I said, serving as the Weber State University Student Association president. He is a business administration major with minors in psychology and German. He plans on pursuing a PhD in business organizational behavior and work as a professor and a consultant for sports organizations. So now if we could just thank everybody for coming. All right, so we're going to just get started. First question, kind of just to open everything up, is, and I'm going to direct this specifically to Dr. Murray. What do you feel is the main function of the news media?
Sure. The main function of the news media? You didn't want to ask one of the journalists first?
Yes, I told you that.
Sure. I think from a political point of view, right, the main function of the news media is to provide, especially free news media, not a government-run news media, is to provide an alternate source of information to the government's information. So how a democratic republic is going to work, operate them, so that the people understand what their elected officials are doing. Elected officials have an interest in telling you one version, the best possible version for their own interest. And so we need some other entity to make sure that the only story we're hearing is not coming from the government. Because that makes it that we have more sides to that story.
So, and then this is what I specifically like to direct to Charlie Trentelman. Do you think that the growth of online sources, like Dr. Murray was talking about how the government is wants to us to hear one side of the story, so it's probably beneficial to have news media. But do you feel like the growth of online sources such as Facebook and blogging as ways to gather information on current events has improved or hurt the quality of information that the American public can get?
Well, I think it's probably improved it, but with the caveat that the public has to be paying attention and looking at all the sources. You've got a lot of rather politically centered media these days, both liberal and conservative. And if you really want to get around a view, you have to look at all those different media, not just your particular favorite. In a way, we've gone back to the way the Founding Fathers saw news media when they wrote the First Amendment back in 1790 or whenever it was. Because back then, news media was incredibly biased. It was incredibly, the labor unions had their own newspapers, the Tories had their own newspapers, the Whigs had their own newspapers. Everybody, if you wanted to get an idea of what was really going on, you had to read them all. And we've kind of come around to that again, because we've got all these news sources. We've got everybody who wants to can have a blog. I have a blog on www.standard.net. Leah. And just about anybody who wants to these days can be their own newspaper. It's kind of the First Amendment on steroids. And so, yes, it has improved knowledge, it has improved coverage of the government. With the caveat, you've got to be paying attention. You've got to start thinking in terms of, what is this guy saying? Is he believable? What is that guy saying? Is he believable, or this lady, or whatever?
Right. And so now I just kind of want to open it up to the panel. Do you guys, this is just for anyone that would like to answer, do you guys feel that it's immoral for political analysts to kind of give their own perspective or views on certain issues? And do you feel like that happens?
I don't see the problem with that. I don't think it's necessarily immoral as long as they're passing themselves off as political analysts and not journalists and not reporters. And I think that's the problem that we have now, is that you have your Glenn Becks, for instance, who are acting kind of as purveyors of news, and people do look to Glenn Beck or Bill O'Reilly, who really are commentators on the news as journalists, as straightforward journalists. And so while there's not necessarily an immoral quality to being able to offer analysis, it has to be couched as analysis. Traditionally, if we go back to, say, more traditional forms of media like newspapers, the editorial page and the op-ed page were clearly separate from everything else in the newspaper, saying this is the news and this is opinion, and we're seeing the blurring of that line.
Right.
I think you have to ask yourself, what is a political analyst? I mean, if it's just somebody exercising their First Amendment rights to comment on what George Bush or President Obama did lately, yeah, they're a political analyst, but isn't that kind of the point? Their views, their analysis is going to be driven by their own background and their own views on things. When I do political analysis in my column in the newspaper, that's driven by my own past and my own views on things. I'm always amused when somebody calls me up and says, my opinions are so biased. It's like, well, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as, I just came from theories of personality class, and we talk about how you go through all these theories of personality, and you need to be eclectic or take a little bit from each of those that you feel fits to what your overall ideology is of that personality. And I kind of think of the same way when it comes to, I don't think it's irresponsible or immoral for a political analyst to give their viewpoint, because in a lot of ways it helps to open my mind up to a different way of thinking about something. I'm not so self-centered or, I guess, tunnel vision on a concept or an idea, and it really helps me then determine, okay, where do I stand in accordance to that? However, I do agree with what Shane was saying in that, very much so saying this is my opinion, or that I am an analyst, not this is what is reported. Right. This is the truth. It's more of an opinion of what that truth may mean.
Definitely. Okay, and so for the next clip, we'll just kind of look at two things that came up pretty recently in the news, and both of these clips were kind of reported as news as opposed to political analysis. You guys could just be a judge for it yourself as far as the accuracy and if that's moral or not.
So on Tuesday, we talked about the black man who showed up in Arizona where President Obama was speaking, armed to the teeth. But this leads me to MSNBC, where on Tuesday, Contessa Brewer filed a report about healthcare protesters showing up armed. In it, she used tape of that same black guy with a rifle and said this.
And the reason we're talking about this, a lot of talk here, Dylan, because people feel like, yes, there are Second Amendment rights for sure, but also there are questions about whether this has racial overtones. I mean, here you have a man of color in the presidency and white people showing up with guns strapped to their waist.
But like I said, the guy was black, but you never would have known because MSNBC had strategically edited the tape, so the race of the armed dude wasn't revealed. Now take a look at the tape we used of the guy from Tuesday. Now clearly you can see the man who goes by the name Chris, and that he's African American. Now here's what MSNBC did.
Obama addressed the veterans of foreign wars in Phoenix.
Awesome. So why did MSNBC go way out of its way to obliterate the race of Chris? Because it didn't fit the story MSNBC wanted to tell. That if you disagree with Obama, you must be a white crazy person with guns, even if you're black.
So, that's kind of one example, but don't think that this whole bias in media is just something that's specifically reserved for the liberal media, because in our second clip, you'll kind of see some of the, and this isn't from an actual news story, but this is just some statistics that the next person kind of brings out as far as Fox, people that primarily watch Fox News and their education on some of the current events.
Economists estimate that the stimulus created more jobs, right? And these are independent, nonpartisan, et cetera, and the numbers are a little over 1 million jobs created by the stimulus. Fox News viewers, of course, were 12%, on average, less likely to know the facts about that. Then you go down the list. Economists have estimated that the healthcare law will actually, and this is not just an estimate, it is fact. The Congressional Budget Office, again, nonpartisan, et cetera, it will not worsen the deficit, it'll make the deficit better. How uninformed were Fox News viewers about that? 31 points more uninformed than the average viewer. Why? Because Fox News keeps telling them, oh, deficit, out of control, this healthcare law, deficit. It makes it seem like the healthcare law actually added to the deficit, when it does not, it does the opposite. It actually takes away from the deficit. Fox News viewers don't know that because they got fed propaganda. You go down the list, the economy is getting worse, they think, by 26 points. Wrong. Now look, the economy's got massive troubles, I talk about it all the time. But as a matter of adding jobs, it has been adding jobs, not reducing jobs. By the standards of the recession, et cetera, the economy's been getting better. I wish it did better than that. But if you think that the economy has been actually getting worse under Obama, well, that's just flat out not true.
All right, so those are two kind of specific instances. Drew, I'm going to direct this kind of at you. So for the first clip, as far as showing the strategic editing of the clip to make it seem like it was actually a white person when actually it was somebody that was black, as somebody that's involved with television and the whole editing process, do you think that that is just completely immoral, or is that something that happens like often, or like how often does that sort of thing happen?
I think it makes a difference on whether we're talking national cable networks or local news. Because I think you see that a lot more on those two channels, because they do have their angles, they have their ideologies that they're trying to espouse. That, as he pointed out, was wrong, and I'd say immoral to present something out of context, or to change the context entirely and put something else. Having worked in local TV news, I don't believe I saw anything like that, or anything close to that, because for most local stations, they are a little bit more down to earth and looking to serve the public, like they should be. They're not really big cost and giant machine. So I think yes, it was wrong. Does it happen at that level? Probably. Does it happen to both well? It may happen. In my experience working with TV stations here, California, elsewhere, it just wasn't, it was almost even a question. I mean, the stories we were covering were there to talk about what we can help the community and how to inform them. Not to say that we're total angels, but that I don't think I saw anything that needed this.
So now I'm just going to kind of open everything up to the audience or anybody on the panel. Yes?
On that first clip, I think the first question I'd ask is, he is inferring or he's coming up with an intention by the people that edited that tape. How do we know that's correct? We don't know what MSNBC was thinking when they edited that tape. We don't know what the photographer was thinking when he shot and cropped that shot the way he did.
Right.
And he is basically assuming, well, it must be racism. We don't know that.
That saw the clip and she maybe was uninformed and didn't know that it was actually the black man. So she just said what she thought.
We don't know. And, you know, the commentator before, I don't know what she had seen or heard. But basically, the person criticizing it is saying, well, that proves bias, but we don't know what was going on in the editor's minds when they edited that. So I think the first question is how do we know he's right?
So then we get into a point where it's like, are you being biased about exposing the biases?
Yeah.
Which then is like a whole other problem. So it's like, how do you really know who's telling the truth about anything when you get that deep into it? I mean,
yeah, how do we know that guy's, you know, that basically the implication that it was racially biased in the editing, that's that guy's opinion. We don't know that he's right or not. He's got his own opinion, fine.
That's been an issue of accuracy.
And I find it funny as well that we have these two networks nitpicking at each other for mischaracterizing the news. Fox especially has been accused of this very same thing on multiple times. I mean, it's wrong across the board if this was actually intent to mislead people, but there was the labor unrest in Wisconsin, for instance, and there was a clip circulating on YouTube that showed a Fox News clip, and you could see a palm tree in the background going on during some of these protests. And so I don't know about you, but I haven't seen any palm trees, or in Wisconsin, I don't think that exists. So, yeah, again, I mean, you have to take into account what's the reason for this, and maybe it was a mistake, but I find it funny that we have MSNBC on the left and Fox News on the right, just kind of sniping at each other over things that they both have been accused of doing. You know?
But of course, they're making money, right? As soon as Fox News enters the game and they decide to be fair and balanced, right? You know, MSNBC decides to move left, CNN decides not to, CNN's ratings plummet. So it's not funny. I mean, it is it's a private industry making profit. They know that they can make money if they hype the conflict. And I also would say, to be fair to the Fox News crowd, it's unfair to suggest that Fox is doing propaganda if the people who are self-selecting coming to their news station know less than other people. It is very possible that the reason that whatever crowd is self-selecting to go to Fox News to get its news also happens to be a crowd that no matter what you tell them about President Obama, do you know what I'm saying, the cognitive dissonance, they're just not going to hear it, and it's not Fox News's fault. It's not the cause. But to me, these are two industries making a ton of money, which, by the way, is what the media's non-real function is, right? The non-political function is for them to make money.
Yeah, I mean, it's business. We have for-profit news. I mean, news is business, period.
right, but then at the same time, I've also heard sometimes where maybe people in the audience, or maybe you all have heard, that the media, specifically in America, since it's a republic and you need informed voters and you need people to actually know what's going on, I've heard the media be characterized as the fourth branch of government, oftentimes. So if this is something that's kind of looked at as the fourth branch of government, how all right is it to just say, we're going to make a whole bunch of money and just make things that are just not even based in fact, and have people taking this as dogma? You know, like people like really believe everything that they see. So I'm just going to kind of, like I said, open this up to the audience because that's one of the big things that we try to do. So yeah, I was going to actually ask a question, but I like it.
Well, I kind of want to take issue with the fact that I can't think that MSNBC wouldn't know that that person was black. How could they not know that? Isn't that the whole idea of news, is knowing all the facts and getting all the facts and getting all the facts correctly? And to obviously not know or misunderstand that that person was not African American, that he was white? If that's the case, then they didn't do their job properly. They didn't get their facts. And so to then actually edit it and then say, misrepresent the fact that that person is African American, then something's wrong. Something's wrong with the gatekeepers there at that particular network.
Can I respond to that?
I think, just one second really quick. It's along the same lines, so that's one of the reasons I think people, why they refer to the media as the fourth branch of government is because there's a lot of expectation that they should know everything and have all the facts. And while we'd love if that were the case and they reported it correctly, not always do they have all the facts. And much like even a politician, they say everything they do have, and strategically, you know, they don't want necessarily the populace to know they don't have all the facts. They're trying to deliver as much news as they can. It's much like when students come to me and they say I'm a student body president, and they ask me all the questions about Weber State University, thinking that I should know all of the answers. And I will give as much of the answer as I can, knowing very well that I need to go back and study a little bit more about it to give a better answer to the next individual. So I think it's fair to say that they should have all the facts and that they, in this situation, possibly did, but it's also fair to say that they possibly did not.
I just want to know why the fourth branch isn't as perfect as the other three branches. The other three branches are
I think we're a lot more perfect and probably as well funded. One response to the gentleman's question, and it's, which you know, I mean, the reason the guy's race came up is not because of the story as it was covered, it was because of that guy's criticism, who assumed a white bias by the people at MSNBC or whichever network it was. When I'm a reporter, or even as a columnist, when I'm dealing with people who are black, white, green, whatever, the only time we bring up the race of that person is if it is pertinent to the story. If a description of a bank robber includes his race, then we mention it. If I see a guy go into a cafe and talk to him about politics, his race is irrelevant to me. Your race is irrelevant to me. And the person covering that was a news person who was out covering an event, and I'm going to assume wasn't told by his editor, okay, find the white guys carrying guns. And he couldn't find one, so we got real close on the black guy. I don't believe that happened. I can't imagine that happening at a responsible news organization. At the Standard Examiner, if a guy's carrying a gun, I say a guy's carrying a gun in the story. Now, if you want to infer from that I'm biased because I didn't say he was black because black guys, only white guys carry guns, go for it. That's your opinion. But news coverage does not, we're supposed to be racially neutral.
Right, but
That's our job as a race.
but in the
Yeah,
clip,
but at the same time, in that particular clip, they specifically brought up race. So if
Well,
they
that's-
specifically bring up race, they better know the fact.
Well, that's the thing, I was gonna point out, is we talked about earlier that it is a business. They're trying to get facts or anything, you know, to fill the airways, to keep their bottom line. And so it may be that the editor was, you know, it is cutting quick and didn't get the info to the, you know, the lady that was anchoring or hosting that segment. She may not have had time to do her research or didn't bother to be accurate. And I think that's a big issue of, at any level of media and journalists is it's, there's a demand to produce content and accuracy and other things slide by that shouldn't. So that's kind of where we can read bias into that, but I think a lot of it's just people are going too fast because they're trying to make their money.
so now we're just gonna go ahead and move forward to this next clip. It's just kind of looking more specifically. Shane, did you have something that you want to say real quick?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think Drew brings up a really good point in that we're talking about bias today, of course, but you also have to realize the current news environment and how fast-paced this is. I mean, we're talking about, many of you probably have Twitter accounts, Facebook, and people expect news immediately. I mean, next. The saying is, your deadline is now, pretty much. And so with that, accuracy is going to take some hits. There's no way around it.
So so those first two clips were just kind of looking at two kind of general instances, but for this, the next clips, we're going to look at specifically the whole controversy behind Barack Obama's birth certificate controversy and whether or not he was a legitimate United States citizen, and look at how different media covered that. So here we go.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
You've even say you're sending a team of researchers to Hawaii to take a look at whether or not that is the case. Mr. Trump, I mean, this has been debunked by so many people on so many levels, including, well, CNN, we did our own documentary, been to Hawaii numerous times, speaking with people, not only who knew his parents, but the childhood school teacher, the babysitter, young students who knew him. But you say yourself, Mr. Obama, that there's nobody who remembered him as a young child in Hawaii. And we've spoken to those people who do remember him. I want you to listen. Just take a listen here to what they say, what they recall.
He was very funny. He was really warm, friendly, kind of a prankster.
Smile, big smile. The lefty, when I say left-hand jump shot from the corner, and nothing but net very often.
So, Mr. Trump, I mean, in listening to people who were there in Hawaii, who recall him as a boy, you say there was no one who recalled him from kindergarten or from his young childhood on The View. There are people who are there who recall him being born there. The governor says that he recalls him being born there. There is evidence that
I'm sure the governor really recalls him. I think the governor's taking a bullet for the party. Look, I didn't say that. You have to be born in the country. If he was 3 years old or 2 years old or 1 year old and people remember him, that's irrelevant. You have to be born in the country. There's no birth certificate. There's only a certificate of live birth, which is a totally different thing and a much, much lower standard. There are no hospital records. His own family doesn't know what hospital he was born in Hawaii, but you have no hospital records in any of the hospitals that he was born in. No bills, no room numbers, no nothing. They do have for other people, but they don't have for Obama. His grandmother in Kenya said that he was born in Kenya. Now, he could have been born, and she said it very strongly, that he was born in Kenya, and she was there when he was born. And the newspapers were a week late, so he could have been born in Kenya and gone over to the United States, and everybody wants to be a U.S. citizen, and his grandparents put an ad in saying that he was born in the United States because of all the benefits you get from being born in the United States. CNN has not done a very good job.
I have to interrupt here because I know what you're talking about. I know the report you're talking about. Within that interview itself, it has been discredited. There is an interview that was done here, and in the interview, Obama's step-grandmother says that she was there when he was born, and the interpreter realizes when the questioner again asked him if he was born in Kenya that she was misinterpreted, that was not correct.
Now it's a misinterpretation.
Well, I mean, if you listen to the interview and you see the transcript here, it says no, Obama was not born in Mombasa, he was born in America. The interviewer, the translator, asks again if this is the whereabouts of when he was born. He thought he was born in Kenya, and he says no, he was born in America, not in Mombasa.
So now April 27th, Paris Fox covering it. This is kind of hard to hear, sorry.
She was first raised, most people forget this, by the Clinton campaign in 2008. Like other things have been raised over the past by the Democrats and then the Republicans, and conservatives get slammed for bringing it up. He could have put this to rest an awful lot earlier than he did just today. This verse is in the original, a copy of the original form. It was stamped just 2 days ago. There was a lieutenant colonel who went to prison for refusing to follow orders from someone who had not proved to his satisfaction, the colonel's satisfaction, sadly, there are a lot of ignorant people in this country, Donald Trump being one of them. So he had, as Cal said, to put us to rest and focus on the important issue.
Okay, but nevertheless, you can't discount the fact that the president is actually responding to these allegations that, where is this birth certificate, is he a citizen, and he's actually coming forward with it because Donald Trump really stirred the pot with this issue, at least now. He didn't do it before when the Clintons said, but he's doing it now. I'm just saying. I was kind of surprised that he even sort of went to that level and said, okay, I'm going to show it to you.
Well, very quickly, 50% of Republicans here that believe that he was not born here. 20% think he's a Muslim. Sadly, there are a lot of people out there who believe this, and a lot of those people will continue to believe it, because to many people in this country, the facts don't matter. And the media has supported it too, by giving Donald Trump a platform. When there was just some Joe Schmo birther somewhere at a rally of 12 people, nobody would care what he said. But Donald Trump is a rich, powerful guy who has really gotten in the gutter and has shown such ignorance and racism, and he continues to show that. Like, just like Obama, how did he get into Harvard, to Columbia? I mean, he continues to delegitimize our president. President Obama today, in this news conference, is smart, thoughtful, classy, and dignified. Things Donald Trump will never be.
I can't respond to all of that because it would take me an hour.
This is what the left does. If you want to criticize the president of the United States, then you're a racist.
Okay, so looking at the Barack Obama birth certificate controversy, you just kind of see the reason we added the dates was because you can see on April 7th, CNN felt like the whole issue was a dead issue. It was dispelled, and he had proven that he was a citizen. And then you have April 27th, 20 days later, Fox saying that, that hasn't been disproved, it's still a problem. It kind of, to me, it seemed like a lose-lose situation, because when he did finally present the birth certificates, people were like, well, why would you listen to people and be so petty? But then when he didn't, it's like, all right. So how do you feel about something like that? I mean,
wow.
Go for it, Shane.
Thanks. My own opinion is that this was a dead issue before it began. And I think what we're seeing here is an ill effect of being accused of media bias. The media, I believe, are so worried about being accused of being biased in one way or another that they're giving equal time to people like birthers. These crackpot theories that shouldn't be out there in the first place. I mean, what's next? We're going to have an investigation on whether the moon's made of cheese? There are important issues out there, and we just saw minute after minute after minute, and day after day after day, week after week, spent on this issue, right? When there are so many other issues out there that affect people's lives. And I think that it was just wasted time.
Shane, the moon landings were fake, so we don't know that.
Oh, okay.
No, really. In Arizona someplace. I agree with Shane. It's really when President Obama's election was certified by the Senate or by Congress, that should have been it. If the entire United States Congress can't say somebody is a citizen of the United States, natural-born citizen, who can? And this is one of those situations where you really have to question the motives of the people who keep saying that there are so many questions about this. It's like, well, you're coming up with all these questions about stuff that aren't real. This short form that was released, well, it doesn't have the right signature on the back, or it doesn't have a raised impression. And there are high-definition pictures of it on the internet showing it had the right signature, it had a raised impression. Basically, they're accusing the entire state of Hawaii of fraud when they criticize this thing. And so it was a way to keep things going. I'll be brutally honest with you, it was good for web hits. I'm sure everybody who dealt with this controversy one way or the other saw their web hits go up and web hits turn. Where you make money in this business. And again, it comes back to business.
I guess I would say, and I'll direct this at Kyle, do you think that certain times when people maybe try to overhype the legitimacy of issues, like one thing that stood out to me, if you guys remember, he said the governor of Hawaii remembers Barack being born. Like, I don't know, I'm from California, I don't think that the governor, I know I'm not as big a deal as Barack, but I don't think that governors just remember people being born. Like, I think that's kind of weird. So, like, I mean, do you think that kind of like delegitimizes certain things when people try to act like, oh, the governor?
Yeah, because I'm sure he was governor at the same time when he was born too, we were just saying it. No, I think it shows that the person or individual or group of individuals are human. I mean, think about every time that it's a natural reaction when you're attacked to become defensive. It's funny, I keep going back to my class this morning, but you can tell I'm a student. We talked about the theories of personality and the id and the ego, and how when you're attacked, you automatically think, well, okay, the teacher gave me an F in the class, it's his fault. I'm not dumb, it's his fault, or it's her fault. And that's just how we rationalize. We want to see us in a better light. And I'm sure that's the exact same thing with the whole news media source. I'm sure as soon as someone attacks the signpost, Shane's not going to be like, you're right. You know, we're worthless. We don't need it. They're going to come back with a defense. And sometimes that defense mechanism either over-exaggerates something, and I'm not saying that was an over-exaggeration, but it's human reaction in a lot of cases to over-exaggerate or trying to put yourself in a better light than maybe you are, more to protect yourself and maybe your group and your following than anyone else. So I think it shows that there's a human perspective there, and we were just discussing during the clip that when scientists do research, they use peer-reviewed journals, not a media source like MSNBC, for that very reason, that there is a very humanistic point to it that really needs to be out to the public and attacked from all different angles. You can't be defensive about your opinion or the truth. If you put it out there and let people come at it from all angles, it will, be sorted out if the general public allows it to do so. I think sometimes we just take, oh, CNN's right, let's move on, when really I think the different media sources are there to help educate us in many different ways.
But there are, well, I just want to open this up to the audience, like, there are media sources such as PBS that, I mean, for all intents and purposes, they're pretty balanced, but I mean, like, does anybody, like, raise your hand if you go to PBS to, like, watch the news or something?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I was just saying, like, raise your hand if you go to PBS as, like, a news source, as opposed to going to Fox or MSNBC or something like that. Like, is there anybody? So, like, do people do that? Do you guys, like, what did you say? You guys said BBC? NPR? I don't know, what is that? There's like way too many commentators in here. You guys just all know all the organizations.
Well, I just want to point out that what we saw there wasn't necessarily traditional news journalism. I didn't see them sitting at their desk and delivering information. They were both debates. They were both kind of arguments, talking with Trump or with the other guy, discussing the issue.
I think it was Cal Thomas. He's a very conservative commentator.
Right, so it's kind of commentary. So to me, that wasn't necessarily journalism bias. Yes, both of the entities had their angles that they were trying to hold on to, but that goes to their demographic. That's what we mentioned earlier. That's who they're speaking to and who they're presenting information for. And so I think but I think that like we're saying, there are other places out there where you know that the angle of the media is not slanted as far left or right. NPR, the BBC, PBS. I mean, I'll watch a documentary from PBS and learn a whole lot more about the issue where I can make my own decision than I'm going to learn from watching either of those stations. However, if my ideology lines up with one of those stations and that's where I go to get my news, that's just me being uninformed. I think that's more of the issue rather than fixing the media being biased or not biased or accusing it. I think more so we got to focus on educating the public to consume the media and understand it.
Yeah, just to go back to what Charles was saying at the beginning of our conversation, that the onus of responsibility really is on the public to search those things out, to get a broad view of what's occurring in the world. But the problem is that it's become easier and easier to not do that. We live in a very strange time where we have a wealth of information on the internet. It's all over the place.
You find what you want.
Yes, but at the same time, you can make that information so narrow and so specific that you will never hear any outside perspectives or news, period. I could go on my Google page, for instance, and every single little widget and window on there could deal with, say, My Little Pony, because that's what I love. And I don't want to hear about news because I just care about My Little Pony, right? And so, I mean, you could do that now. And so even though we have all this information swimming around us, it's the possibility that we don't purposefully access that information. It's more and more.
So does anyone, I just want to make sure that does anyone in the audience have any input that they want to say or any like comments on the last two clips or anything? Right. You can pose questions.
Yeah, I just have a question to pose to the panel. Thinking of like NPR, and I watch the antenna aired world that has like news media from Somalia and from China. And it's just so much like watching the news and not hearing just opinions 24/7, you know, and people dressed up like journalists and acting like journalists. So where did we go wrong in American journalism to where it's now the cult of personality and talking about local news media? Look at Fox 13. Well, that's pop culture news. That's all they cover. And the fact that like when we have stars that die or overdose, that dominates the media locally and nationally. So where did we go wrong? And how can we get to reporting news and building democracy?
I think that, and so I'm going to reveal something of myself this morning, but Beyonce is pregnant, if you didn't know, and her pregnancy received 8,500 tweets a second, okay? Osama bin Laden was killed. His killing received 5,000 tweets per second. So where did we, I'm not part of the we, this is the journalist establishment, go wrong is the we that is the American public and what we consume. I care that Beyonce is pregnant. I'll never meet her. I don't know why I care about it, but my goodness, she damn well she was pregnant. That was fabulous. 3,500 tweets per second more, if you will. I don't know, that's a way of rating this. Then I cared that someone who, implemented the most egregious terrorist attack in this country was finally killed. So where did we go wrong? I think it's we and what we want to consume, not so much what journalists are giving us. So again, it freed it from the outset. It is a private industry and they sell their product. We buy Beyonce, Paris Hilton, whatever, insert any entertaining star here, more than we buy information that might actually help us understand our government better, understand the food we're eating better. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think we went wrong in what we choose to consume.
And I was going to say, Dr. Murray, kind of to follow up on that, obviously young people are the ones that are more likely to use things like Twitter and Facebook and all that. So as somebody that is an expert in youth and politics, what do you think that kind of says about, do you think that that's kind of indicative of all of American society, or do you think that that's more from the age of like 29
Is it
and younger?
generational?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that my grandfather didn't get a tweet about Beyonce. I'm pretty sure he wasn't tweeted about Osama bin Laden either. So, but I don't want to say that, because in the moments where this generation, there's some really interesting research being done on how social media are being used to include people in politics. Does that make sense? So actually the way Obama used Twitter and Facebook in 2008, which now everyone's trying to emulate. So I don't think it's generational, because there are factions, if you will, of this younger generation who are consuming that political news and doing it well. And of course, every student here will be doing it well, right? So I was, but People magazine sells more than The Economist, right? And that would be an older generation.
These are great points. We're swimming in information and we choose to care about the superficial. Journalism is about money now, not about responsible, arbitrary, impartial, factual, in-depth analysis of important policy questions. Where does that leave us in a world where policy questions are increasingly technical, more complicated, and we require an educated citizenry? The panel, and I'm overstating this just for effect, seems to be letting the American public off the hook here.
I think that actually the American public has a greater responsibility in today's environment. As they said, it's the responsibility of the public to seek out that information that's available.
Do you have confidence that they will do that?
What's that?
Do you have confidence that they will do that?
not necessarily. I think to expand upon what you're saying and to expand upon the points we were making just before, I think before the media could afford to give people what they needed rather than what they wanted. And I think there's a difference there sometimes. As we've been discussing throughout, this is a for-profit industry. I believe it was the gentleman who was sitting over here and was no longer here, he mentioned the idea of the gatekeeper. Media entities aren't gatekeepers anymore. There is no such thing as a gate. The idea of a gatekeeper meant that the media would supply to the public information. Well, now people just go around the gate. It doesn't matter if a media entity puts it out there or some guy in his mom's basement puts it out there. It's out there. And so I think now that's giving rise to this hyper competition. I worked with Charles at the Standard Examiner, and I started there in 2005. And when I first got there, we were basically just doing shovelware online, meaning everything that was in the newspaper, we were just shoveling it online, and we weren't doing anything different. Well, at that point in time, we were really just thinking about competing with newspapers because that's all we really could do. But once we really started to grasp the potential of the internet, now you see newspapers competing with, say, television stations, competing with radio stations, competing with that guy blowing in his mom's basement, so on and so forth, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And in that hyper competition, I think that the responsibility of the media is giving way to the media wanting to provide what the public wants rather than needs. And you see, newspapers especially, the profits from newspapers just sinking and sinking and sinking. So they're trying to... Yes, I know. It's a foreign concept. I'll tell you about it. It used to exist. And so they're trying to make up that money, And so they're trying to entertain. They're trying to give people what they want. And that doesn't necessarily equate to what they need.
And to expand on that, news media has always done personality reporting. If you go to the archives of the Tribune or the Standard Examiner at the University of Utah's excellent archive online, you can find movie star stories on page 1 back in the 1920s. That sort of thing has always gone on, but now you've got a much larger proliferation of things. But as far as, you say letting the public off, that is a problem because there have been surveys of college graduates that have found that 65% of college graduates have such poor reading comprehension that when they graduate from college, 65% are incapable of reading an editorial in the New York Times and drawing an independent conclusion from that. Now, not just read it and understand it and know what it says, but draw an independent conclusion from that. Now, that to me is one of the scariest statistics I've ever seen, and that's a huge problem. And how we solve that, I don't know, because reading in general has kind of gone downhill of late. People tend to look more for entertainment than, the news media has stayed pretty much the same size as far as reporting and analysis, whereas this giant proliferation of everything else. And so, I don't know the answer to that one. That's just an observation that when I found out that 65% of you guys can't read my column and disagree with me for good reason, that's kind of scary. Because I want you to understand and disagree with me, but for the right reasons.
Right. So, real quick, the last bit that we're going to take a look at, this subject, I picked this one specifically because how many of you guys remember when Colin came? It was probably around 1 year ago from today. Colin came and he was up in the ballrooms, and we were conservative environment, conservative, populist, and we had Colin, but there was quite a stir when he came to the White House for a poetry gathering this summer. So we're going to just kind of look at how the different media reported on that issue.
President of the New Jersey State Troopers Fraternal Association. So, Mr. Jones, why did you find out about the invitation to comment, and what did you do? We actually have a group of sites that will be finding behavior related to joint chest started taking the right to task for their faux outrage over the White House invitation to hip-hop artist Common. Here with his take on the situation, our friend, our neighbor, Troy. Who is Common? Is he a rapper? Which of course means he's a demon who called for the killing of George W. Bush, who uncritically supports cop killers, because all rappers do, and who loves the Reverend Jeremiah Wright and raps in his Church of Hate. Which means that his invitation to the White House poetry slam this week means that Obama is actually a Caucasian hating Malcolm X in disguise. Or is Common a thoughtful musician, a sometime vegan who dates tennis star Serena Williams, supports animal rights, AIDS awareness, and is committed to not putting anti-gay slurs in his lyrics, who was critical of President Bush and upset about the invasion of Iraq, as many were, and who's supportive of Mubia Abu Jamal, and like many, has serious and relevant questions about his guilt. Common is among the most kind, gentle, humble, poetic, and intellectual people working in music today, and the attempt to use him as a vehicle to demonize hip-hop and score points against the White House is a reason even Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four would not be able to stretch enough to complete.
So, just a little background on the whole controversy with Common. He was supportive of a lady that was convicted, I believe, in '97 or accused of killing 2 New Jersey state troopers, who is now living in somewhere in South America, and they're refusing to send her back to the United States because she might be facing the death penalty. And Colin has been outspoken in saying that he thinks she was framed. She was a black nationalist around the 70s, and that was a time when a lot of that sort of thing was kind of happening, depending on who you talk to as far as people getting framed. So that's kind of what leads to the New Jersey state trooper being so upset about Common being invited to the White House. That's what you kind of saw in the first, but the second clip was kind of speaking more to the fact that Common, if anybody has heard Common, to call him misogynistic and say that he's full of hate and anti-establishment, anti-police, that might be, like you said, it might be a stretch. You guys can choose for yourself, but I don't want to be biased because that's bad. We're talking about bias. So, I mean, here we kind of see that the pop element that you all were talking about kind of coinciding with the political element, and you even seeing differences on how conservative or liberal media cover that. So, I mean, Kyle, as one of the students on there, do you think that something like this even has a place being talked about, or do you think that they're just trying to do that to reach out to young people and make young people care about the news, or like, what do you think about when you see that clip?
Well, this goes back to basic economics and supply and demand. What's being demanded is what needs to be supplied, and you can learn about it in just any economics class, but it seems like society, and I like Dr. Johnson, correct? Yeah. I like this remark on letting the public off, and I don't think we are. I don't feel like I am up here at all, letting the public off, but I'm also not going to let the media off as well. Supply and demand, if there's only one thing supplied, then that's the only thing that can be demanded. And so in this case, we show 2, and we keep going to, I believe it was both MSNBC and Fox again, and they know on their charts, on their supply and demand, that what's being demanded by the public is information that is titillating and brings a lot of viewers. If you think it's very pertinent, then maybe you'll watch it, and if you just are a fan of Common and want to see what people think about him, you're going to watch it too. And that's kind of, that's what the public's viewpoint is, and the media knows that, and so you have both sides. You're not going to let the public off and just letting them go, and they should seek out the right sources and maybe go to different channels and find out who Common is today. How has he changed? Is he a hateful rapper? Is he just a rapper and that's how his viewpoints come out, is through that form of music? I see a Run DMC shirt here. We also had Red Run last year, who came and was in a similar type of lifestyle. He was a rapper turned reverend, wonderful gentleman who touched an individual's life, even here at Weber State University, we found out much later. So you can't let the public off, you can't let us off, and I don't think anyone in this room are the type that just go with the flow of the media, because you wouldn't be here about the bias, well, unless you're getting credit in your classes. So maybe not.
Thanks to all the professors for doing that, by the way.
But the other way is the media in some way can't just supply one thing, and that being crap.
Thank you for that, Kyle. I think that we got two streams going on here. One is we're all bemoaning the state of the media and what citizens want. My point, and I think you touched on it, Kyle, is that we really need an educated citizenry. And as Charlie says, you gotta know history, you gotta be able to read, you gotta be able to have a critical thinking skills to be a good democratic citizen, as Dr. Murray points out. We need, in an age where we increasingly need sophisticated citizens, we're getting bombarded, and this part of this is capitalistic, but we're bombarded by misinformation and bad information. And when we take a complicated policy issue like the debt ceiling, which is a crisis for this country, and we need very educated people to discuss how we're going to balance budgets and all we get is coverage of the bickering between the parties. And we don't get, no one wants to, you got to go to college and take a class from Dr. Murray before you get a media chart of, who spends what and who gets what they want from the system. And we can't afford to wait till the students become seniors in college before they become sophisticated consumers of the media. And I think that's what all of you are saying, is we need sophisticated consumers of the media, and then we won't care as much about a celebrity's love life.
Kind of follow up on that, I just want to ask, is anyone in the audience, has anyone actually listened to a song by Common or heard Common rap before? Anybody? Raise your hand. Okay, somebody that does, which one would you say that he's more characteristic of in the music that you've heard? Would you, yeah, she denied it. It's like a date. I was gonna, which one would you feel like more is representative of who Common is as an artist? Do you think that it was more fair, the first portrayal, or the second portrayal was more accurate?
Well, I think that Common's more of an inspirational person. I think he gets his points out, and he may rap about bad things sometimes, but that's what all music does, everything you listen to. So I think he is more of to me, a good person and can inspire people to do better. So.
And even, we'll go here. And sorry about that. Even with doing this, it's kind of biased on my part, because if you listen to a Common song, you're most likely a fan of Common, so you're obviously going to have positive feelings about it. So it's how hard is it to be unbiased? So
I think going off of what was just said here a minute ago about Common, yeah, he does some bad things, quote unquote. Growing up, I was constantly forbidden to watch and see certain things because of the content that was in them. Having become an adult now and being able to make my own decisions, I'm constantly finding that the bad things that Common comes out with always have an underlying reason and meaning behind them. That's the point of art. It's the purpose of art. Common is, I think, a very incredible musician who, yes, he's got a past, but a lot of people do. And the thing is he's trying to overcome that now. His music, yes, it talks about cop killing and all the above, and that's all Fox News, for example, would focus on. And yet, Common's lyrics are not ever pro-cop killing. They are, think about what would happen if cop killing happened. Think about what would happen if President Bush were killed. That kind of thing. It's not like, let's do it. It's what would happen if someone had the guts to do something that crazy. It would be anarchy. And that's what Common's trying to get across. Not necessarily, I'm pro this, just think about it.
So Shane, just kind of on this, with the signpost, do you guys try to make it a point to get both sides of an issue when you're talking about student involvement or elections or any type of thing, even the phone party, any type of thing that happens at Weaver State? Do you guys try to make it a point to say, let's get a couple positives and a couple negatives just so we can have a balance, or you just pick the first 3 or 4 people that you talk to? How does that process work?
Sure. I mean,
I certainly stress that to my students, particularly when you're dealing with a controversial story. And, but it's not just specific to controversial stories. For instance, I wrote a story on decals at Hill Air Force Base once, which I thought was pretty benign. And then I came into work the next day and I had messages on my answering machine lambasting me for not getting the other side about the decals. And so, I mean, yes, even when you don't think there is necessarily another side of the story, there is. And so it's something that I definitely try to impress upon my students, but you also have to take into account the reality of the situation and the reality of the news gathering process. And that is, you're out there, you have a deadline to meet. If opposing viewpoints aren't readily available, what do you do? I mean, sometimes that's just not as easy as it should be, you know? And so, and it's a matter of education and experience in knowing where to look to get those opposing viewpoints. But yes, I do feel it's important, particularly with stories that you definitely have more than one side. And again, decals, I mean, who knew? But I think that you're running up against reality there too.
Yeah, I think this gentleman's comment here actually raises a very good point. And maybe I've been in the news business too long, 40 years is a long time. But I grow weary of this whole, well, get both sides of the argument. I've found over the years that arguments have a whole continuum. There's yes, there's no, and then there's this whole bunch in between. They're very rarely this black and white dichotomy. And unfortunately, in the news media today, you'll get a lot of, like we've seen here today, where you'll get Jon Stewart and Glenn Beck talking past each other. You'll see debates where candidates talk past each other. And, you know, in this particular case, Mr. O'Reilly cherry-picking one thing out of Commons' repertoire to use that to attack the president because he always attacks the president. I'd much rather see not only both sides, but everything in the middle discussed. Obviously, that takes a lot more work, which you end up not being able to do in today's rushed environment. More rushed than it always has been than it was before. When I started news reporting at the Standard years ago, it was always, well, find somebody who likes this and find somebody who does that. You know, we've got a whole list of people who are safe to comment on this side or that side. But after a while, you start to think, you know, gee, maybe there's something in the middle there. Our politicians are not evil. Maybe they're not. And so I think it behooves us in the news business to find that great middle ground. Not just the middle ground, but everything, and to show the whole continuum, which, again, is hard and takes time. But, yeah, you're exactly right. Common may have said some things that were not good. That gave people who don't like Obama an opening to use him to attack Obama. I don't think Mr. O'Reilly really cares about comments, but he cares very much about Obama.
All right, so we have, and then after her comment, we're just gonna have, because we have like a few minutes left, and I just wanna have all the panelists give like a final synopsis of what they would like to say.
My question is not about common, because I don't really care. A lot of like newspapers or news stations or official news entities, either they have either liberal or conservative identity. Is that the bias, or is it possible for an official news entity to have a political identity without being biased? Because it seems like a lot of people say, oh, if you go to this news station, they're biased because they're totally Republican, or this news station is biased because they're totally Democratic. But if I'm a Republican and I want to watch a Republican news station, can I do that? And can that news station still be unbiased?
I think that's exactly what it is. I think, and that's part of the point I was making earlier, that you're looking at the identity, the ideology, presentation. And if that's where you align yourself and that's what you consume and watch, then you'll get fed what you want. And yeah, we call it bias here, but I'm saying that that's, especially those two polar opposites that we've been looking at today on NBC and Fox News, that's what they do. And it's pretty apparent that's they're slanted. And so I would have to say, yeah, I think that most people that watch those, they are aligned with that. They know that that's what they're going to get. Tell me more about what I'd like to hear about. And it would be the more educated, sophisticated person that would say, you know what, I'm going to get the other half of the story and go to the one that perhaps it doesn't really speak to me, but I'm going to see what they're saying about it anyway, to try and understand somewhere in the middle is the truth. And that's why those two polar opposites, for this discussion, are, it's easy to say yes, they're biased, but it's also easy to say that that's their identity, that's their demographic, that's where they make the money, supply and demand.
This weekend, you may have heard Hurricane Irene hit the northeast coast, and my family lives there, and there's flooding very much where my family is. So I'm worried about it. So I was watching all day the news on the hurricane, and I watched and I thought, well, I'm going to think about this. So I watched MSNBC, and then I watched Fox News, and I felt that there was bias in the reporting on the hurricane. You know, I was thinking, there's nothing partisan about a hurricane. But, you know, the angle that they have, you know, the demographic that they're talking to, the narrative that they're telling about the hurricane, they couldn't help it, you know, and while I was worried about my family, I was glad that they, you know. Seriously, it's a hurricane.
So where would you go to get the down the middle? Where do you go?
The weather channel.
I think when you get this whole Republican and Democrat, like, you know, newspapers in Utah used to be very Democratic and very Republican, or whatever other political parties were around. The Salt Lake Tribune was started as an extremely anti-Mormon newspaper. That was its stated goal, was to be anti-Mormon. The Standard Examiner has always been somewhat on the conservative side, just to bobble around. But to me, when you say, well, is this newspaper bias? You know, there has to be a separation between the papers of political slant and the news column, which is how we operate. But also, you know, as a reporter, I have my own personal biases. And to me, the goal has always been not to be whatever objective is, which I don't know what objective means, but it's to be fair to all sides. And that's where it is my job to find the side and the hand side, and then present both arguments. I've talked with Rob Bishop, my own congressman, who I've never voted for, and he knows that, so it's not a secret. But he's told me himself, he says he likes the way I do stories about him because I'm fair, whether I agree with him or not. You know, I'm happy to listen to his argument, present his argument, and so to me that's the goal, is to be fair, not necessarily to acknowledge your bias and then to say, okay, I'm biased this way, so make sure.
Yeah, like Charles, I agree that it's total objectivity. I don't think you can pull that off. You come from real life experiences. And whether you recognize that you have a particular bias or not, you still do. It doesn't have to be a political one, but you still come from a particular background. You see things through a certain lens. And so being fair, I think, is a lofty entity. I think that sometimes people will look at the editorial content of particular news entities and ascribe that editorial content to the news entity as a whole. So for instance, the New York Times, they generally have a lot of liberal columns in their editorial page. But then people will take that and say, well, this is the liberal newspaper, Wall Street Journal on the other side. We're using newspapers as an example. I think the problem occurs is that when those lines begin to blur between editorial content and straight news content, and people no longer understand exactly what they're getting. I think in order to make an informed decision, you have to understand what you're getting. And sometimes it's easy to tell, and then other times it's not so apparent.
All right. If we could just go to Kyle for the last word real quick, because I know a lot of you guys have to get to other classes, so. I will try to be brilliant.
I really think it just comes down to the fact that we do need to be more sophisticated as a populace in how we go about our news source, but then also realizing that I will share a little bit of my opinion or my bias, that those who are actively seeking information are possibly also actively engaged politically. And so you run into a lot of the hazards with MSNBC and Fox, who very much want to touch with one side or the other in order to gain that readership or that viewership. And so maybe there are some twists even on a hurricane story that really wouldn't be there. And so educating yourself on the issues, and then really, I'll put in my little plug here, being an advocate for higher education and education as a whole, and at the state level as well as that the government, the national level, so that we are a more educated populace. I didn't know a lot about peer-reviewed journals and how to be, what would you call it, skeptical of everything. And it's not bad to be skeptical of everything, because then you learn a little bit more about everything and you learn where you stand. We joke, do we want to sit on the right side when we get up here, on the left side? And is it stage right or is it stage left? And is the audience right or audience left? And it's like, where's the table in the middle? Because there's, you know, maybe you're very left wing, right wing in some areas, and the exact opposite in other areas in your viewpoints. And that's why being sophisticated and being open to all media sources, as well as your own personal sources, is, in my opinion, the way to be well-rounded.
That was brilliant. All right, so if you guys could, first off, I want to thank you all for coming. Can we all just give a big round of applause? The whole purpose, I'll just real quick wrap it up. The whole purpose for, not particularly this specific topic, but all the Taboo talks as a series, hopefully you know it's once a month, so the next one's going to be September 27th. Hopefully you guys kind of realize I don't care if you feel one way or the other about these issues, and you don't have to take anything that you heard today up here from me or any of the panelists or anybody in the audience as facts. But just start thinking about these things. Dr. Murray, from her, yes, take it as a fact. All right, but seriously, just start thinking about these things. Go home and do your own research. Go home and kind of like delve into whether or not bias in the media occurs. Maybe try to say, let me take everything I hear with a grain of salt. So thank you all for coming. Like I said, the next one, September 27th, and appreciate it. Thank you guys.